Hi, I'm Leanpub from Leanpub, and in this episode of the Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Joaquim Torres. Based in Sao Paulo, Joaquim is a technologist and manager who helps companies and their leaders bridge the gap between business and technology through education, coaching, and advisory services on product management and digital transformation. Joaquim is the founder and principal consultant of Giaco, where he leverages his expertise in leading and managing successful digital products across various domains such as SaaS, e-commerce, fitness, real estate, and web hosting. You can follow him on Twitter at Joaquim Torres and check out his website at gyaco.com. Joaquim is the author of the Leanpub book, Digital Transformation and Product Culture, How to Put Technology at the Center of Your Company's Strategy. In the book, he answers many questions facing businesses undergoing digital transformation, sharing his learning and experience so that you can drive successful digital transformation processes yourself. In this interview, we're going to talk about his background and career, his book on the nature, challenges, and opportunities presented by digital transformation and product management, and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about his experience as a writer and author. So thank you very much for being on the Leanpub Front Matter podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Lan.
Thanks. I always like to start these interviews by asking people for their origin story. So maybe how, where you grew up, how you first got into the career you got into. So I know you studied, sort of computers and technology at university and things like that. And then, yeah, tell us a little bit of your story.
Sure. So I've graduated as a computer engineer from a college here in Brazil called ITA. It's a sort of MIT here in Brazil, considered. And from there, in back in the 90s, I had my own startup. Back then, it not used to call a startup. It was just a tech company or a company. And it was one of the first internet service providers here in Brazil. And we sold the company for an American company. And I stayed in this American company and I worked in this American company as a product director because this company was acquiring ISPs around the globe to create a big ISP and make the IPO back in the 2000s. That was the trend back then. And my main mission there was to create a common portfolio from the acquired companies. I left this company because I was traveling too much. Then I joined a friend of mine from ITA, Gilberto Maltner, in his company called LocalWeb, which is the biggest web hosting company here in Brazil. I stayed there for 11 years, helping diversify their product portfolio. And when I was there, I wrote two books, the Startup Guide and the Product Management, already published in the Leanpub platform. And after 11 years there, I decided to move to a SaaS company called Conta Azul, an ERP for small businesses here in Brazil. I stayed there for 2 years also, and then I received an invitation to join a company called Gympass, a Brazilian company that was already going international. What they offer was a corporate benefit, so companies could offer their employees access to a huge network of gyms and studios, like 50,000 gyms and studios in 14 countries. And I went there to head the product management as the CPO. And I stayed there for 2 years, and then I received an invitation, a very interesting invitation from a real estate company, a very traditional real estate company here in Brazil called Lopes. Very traditional and very old. They were like 80 years old, and but already a public company, and they were facing the competition from startups, very well-funded startups here in Brazil called Loft and Kitandar, and they were very concerned. Then they went to the stock market. They made what we call the follow-on offer additional stock, and they were able to raise 30 billion US dollars, and they started their digital transformation journey. And then it was missing someone to lead this digital transformation that they made the invitation, and I got a bit afraid because the culture of traditional companies, but decided to accept and see if I was able to bring all my expertise to that company. And then I published my third book on product management leadership, also in Leanpub platform. And then I decided to join the company, stayed there for 2 years, very interesting journey Learned a lot. It's very difficult, but it's doable. But it's very, very difficult. It's much more about mindset than about the digital technology. And I stayed there for 2 years. And after that, I decided, after 30 years of executive career, I decided to make a career change and started to do some consultancy and training, and decided to write my fourth book on digital transformation and product culture. And that's what I've been doing since mid 2022.
Thanks very much for sharing that really great story. I mean, I love the idea of sort of studying computer science basically at one of the top sort of technology colleges, or the top one in Brazil, and then just hitting the ground running, like digital first, digital everything, right? I mean, including like an ISP kind of world, and like creating it from almost nothing, or like it was amongst the sort of first sort of companies to do that. That's just amazing. And then sort of following your path through very different kinds of companies and ending up with something that's sort of digital last. And I don't say that as a criticism, but this is a company that was founded in like 1936 or something like that. It did very hands-on real estate, things like that. And I'm really curious what it must have been like. As you say, you were sort of a bit trepidatious about like the mindset of a company like that, and learning, like seeing that it's all about mindset is so interesting. And I'd like to talk about that in a bit. But what was it like in those early days in Brazil of sort of creating the first ISP? I mean, what were you and your colleagues doing every day?
Yeah, it was very, very interesting. It was learning what could be done at the time. I mean, it was in the beginning of the web, like 1992, 1993, 1994. It was amazing. I remember when I saw the web for the first time, I got, wow, this is amazing. Because prior to the web, we used to have, I don't know if you know, a BBS, bulletin board systems. We access it through a text interface. And then I got access to the only provider here in Brazil called Embratel. And I had the access through the Mosaic web browser prior to the Netscape web browser. And I said, wow, this is amazing. This is going to change everything. And I went to my partners at my company. I said, hey, listen, BBS is probably gonna die, and we need to invest our time and our energy here in becoming a ESP, and that's what we did, because it really changes everything. And then I started to create our website and make animated GIFs and make CGI scripts, and it was fun. It was fun, very, very fun.
It's fascinating. No, that's great. I imagine it was a very exciting time, and especially getting bought, being part of something that got created and then bought out kind of relatively early, and the sort of rocket ship that must have must have been very fascinating. But I wanted to take the opportunity there because you give a great example in the book where you talk about your story, about what it means when we talk about digital products and things like that, right? So, for example, if you're doing an ISP, your product is serving up the internet to sort of like consumers basically. But one thing you can do, if you've got that set up, you can actually sort of think, well, what else can we provide? And we can provide web hosting, for example. And that would be an example of a kind of digital product you can add to a company if its goal, or its strategy is to provide sort of internet services. Well, what are the other internet services that we can provide? And the very difficult decision it must be to sort of decide this over that.
Exactly, exactly. So the very first thing that we did was provide what you said, web hosting. So you need to start to have a presence here in the web. So that's the very first. But after that, with the programming, the ability to program initially with CGI scripts, and then other languages like ASP and other languages, very interesting things started to be possible. And then we started to present our clients with the possibilities, and we started to partner with web developers and software consultancy houses that were able to develop those applications. I remember one of them here in Brazil was connected to a comics book here in Brazil called Turma da Mônica. Is a very famous here in Brazil. Is equivalent to Disney in the US. It's
Okay.
Mauricio de Souza, and this woman, this web developer, she got the account of Turma da Mônica and started to make games for kids so they can back in the 1996, 1997 was so interesting to see this evolution of web not only as a presenting information but also starting to have some
Mhm.
interaction, you know.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that's really fascinating. Actually, and one thing you mentioned, I'm getting the timeline a little bit wrong, but we do like to sort of get into kind of people's personal career
Mhm.
choices and developments in the first part of the podcast. And so you mentioned traveling too much. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and I guess I'm kind of curious, how much was traveling too much? And what were there things in your life that you started to realize, I'm missing out on this, or I'm just too tired all the time. How much was too much travel, and what sort of tipped you over to sort of decide to change that was too much?
I know exactly when I was coming back from Europe and going to Argentina, and but I had there was no direct flight from Europe to Argentina, so I have to pause here in Brazil. But it was only a few hours, and I could not go back home and see my wife. I said, "No, this is way too much. This is not good for me, not good for my family." So I decided to quit. That is not working.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I mean, that's sort of like, very specific moments sometimes. It's not always the case for people that they have that, but when you do, you remember it. Uh,
I do, definitely.
Definitely, definitely. And so, I mean, you sort of told the story already, so maybe we can skip ahead to another really interesting example of the work you've done in your career. So you started, sort of, it's all, internet, sort of web and stuff like that. And then you did a bunch of other things, but then you worked for this really interesting company called GymPass,
Mhm.
which is very, which as you say in your book was sort of known as a tech company, but actually had a lot of people doing a lot of manual work. So you were in this curious position of being brought on, and what was the kind of thing you did there? I mean, was it like what was the manual work that needed to be either automated or digitalized?
Yeah. So what happened there is it is a three-sided marketplace as we saw it because it was connected to gyms, to companies, and to their employees. So we saw it as a three-sided marketplace. And we had a connection with the gyms, and we had a connection with the companies. And from the companies, we needed to receive their list of employees. And they enter our website and they uploaded their list of employees. But as soon as we received our list of employees, their list of employees, we started to work on the list of employees manually. We entered the information manually in the system because we didn't have a system to do that. And also, one thing that we did is payroll discount because one way for the employees to pay for the Gympass monthly access was to have a direct debit into their payroll, into their
Oh,
monthly.
wow.
Yeah. So what we also needed to do is to generate this by hand and send to the companies every month, so the company could send this to their payroll. So this is the kind of thing that we needed to automate. It was all manually, and the companies. So you can have a better sense of the of the issue. The company was already 800 people. It was a good size, 150 people in the US, 150 people in Europe, the other 500 in Latin America, the majority in Brazil. And the tech people was only 30 people, 30 people, very, very small compared to the organization. So the company had to have a big operations team, like 200 people. So it was very, very unbalanced, a lot of manual operations. And another thing that this operation team needed to do is whenever needed to visit a client, they needed to generate a report on the users using the benefit and all the visits they were doing to gyms. So this was done by hand. They extracted the information from the system and went on and put on a PowerPoint or a Google Slides, so all done by hand, manually. So a lot of things to automate.
That's just such a fascinating story. I mean, and anyone who's been involved in the kind of startup world to some extent knows you just kind of get going and you do what you have to do.
Yeah,
And I mean, the limited experience I've had with it, but the idea of dealing with like payroll in multiple companies down to the individual employee level, and I can just imagine all the like, I mean, what people might be wondering, oh, that's dumb. Why would it be so manual? And it's like, well, each company might have different forms that they need to fill out in different ways. They might all have different kind of things like requirements, like, oh, we need the middle name here. We don't need the middle name over there. We need a middle initial in this one, and I'm making all this up, but like the reason it would be manual is there would be just this incredible amount of detail. And if the companies that you're dealing with themselves aren't, haven't gone through digital transformation themselves and they're all manual, then,
exactly.
there's incredible challenges there. And I guess I'm curious if you can recall or if you're willing to talk about it. Was it difficult to get the people who were doing the manual work to kind of use new apps or tools and things like that? Or were they desperate to sort of not do this kind of thing anymore?
They were desperate not to do this kind of
Okay.
thing. They really wanted we were every release that we did were very celebrated. Oh, so I don't need to do this anymore.
Okay.
Oh, thank God, thank God.
That's awesome because often we hear sort of discourse about like, oh no, automation and the computers are coming for our jobs, and it's like that's true, and one should be very sensitive about that kind of thing. But there are a lot of people who are like, thank goodness, bring on bring on the technology.
Yeah.
And then another really interesting experience you had later was, as we already talked about, this sort of old and well established real estate company, and you mentioned that mindset. You learned one of the things about a digital transformation, which we'll define in a little bit later, as you do in your book, but it's somewhat a self-explanatory term. But mindset it can be the hardest thing to change. There can be, I imagine, just sort of suspicion, and I'm just thinking not of my own experience, but other Leanpub authors that I've spoken to over the years, and people who are worried about coming for my job, people who are worried about, well, we've had numbers and numbers of people come up with like they've got the app that's going to solve our problem, and every time it's just a mess and they leave after 6 months, and then we've got to learn a new one. So what were some of the mindset challenges that you experienced in that really interesting position?
Yeah, they were following the very traditional route of digital transformation. So they raised a lot of money, and then they decided to bring some consultants to build new things for them. So they had already a CRM, so let's build a new version of the CRM. They had already a website where users went to search for properties. So let's build a new version of the website. And a very interesting case also, they decided to build an app for the agents, for the brokers.
Hmm.
And the reasoning behind that was that the faster the lead, which is the information that someone is interested in a property, gets to the agent, and the agent replies to this lead, the bigger the chances of evolving this into a negotiation. It's the 101 of sales. Then the faster that you are able to reply, the chances of engaging is bigger. So they decided, oh, let's build an app with push notification. Okay, build an app with push notification. So they brought a consultancy company to do that, and this consultancy company decided to do a discovery. So let's see what we need to put into this app. And they make like 5 months of discovery, typical work of a consultancy. And then they realized there is a lot of things to do. They realized that, for instance, Len is searching for a property like an apartment of 2 rooms in a certain neighborhood. So is Len registered in our database? No, he's not. So let's register Len in our database. So this enters as part of the scope to be built. So they realized also that the agent, they normally search for similar properties to send to the prospect, so it increases the chances of the prospect getting interested and scheduling a visit to at least one of the properties. So search for the property also enters, so the scope gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the app got like 7 months, 8 months development. And they were calling when I entered the MVP, the minimum viable product. Said, no, we cannot call it MVP. MVP is like a month at maximum. It's like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I asked all of this, and they said, well, the main objective was to make the lead get as fast as possible in the hands of the agent. And I said, listen, what we should have done is, okay, let's build the app with the push notification and leave all the rest for the agent to do the way she's used to do. She already does that some way, right? And I said, there is even more. You can even not build an app. You can send the notification through SMS, right? I say, yeah, that's right. Then I talked to the engineers and asked them, can we do that? Can we build this with the SMS? And they said, yeah, we can. And they went there and they built the notification of the lead through the SMS like in 10 days. So there's one thing that they were expecting for 1 year, and in 10 days, all the agents were receiving the notification with SMS. So that's the mindset change. The people at Lopez, they were very, very focused in building things, building features, building applications, and they forgot the result they were after. The result was we need to make the lead get as fast as possible into the hands of the agent, no matter how. Can be an app, or can be an SMS, or can be whatever. It doesn't matter. We just need the fastest way possible to build this way to take the lead into the hands of the agent. So this is the type of mindset change that I started to implement then. And I was very lucky when I entered Lopez to have this scenario, because I used that as an example. Whenever people from the business side came, hey, I have a great idea, let's implement this. And I said, okay, that's a good idea, but what is the result we are after? Because maybe, remember the app with push notification, maybe we can find an easier to implement solution to that. So that's the mindset
Yeah, that's
that I was
that's
thinking about.
That's a really excellent story. That's really great. And it actually gives me a good opportunity to segue to the next part of the interview where we talk about your book, Digital Transformation and Product Culture, how to put technology at the center of your company's strategy. And I love that word how. It's very important there because you have a great Venn diagram in your book where you talk about basically the company's goals and strategies and things like that, the customers' kind of needs and challenges and problems and things like that. And then overlapping both of those is at the very small part at the center of the Venn diagram is available technologies. But it's not all available technologies. It's not the most complex available technologies. If you want to do a digital transformation and then afterward, and we'll talk about the distinction between that and product management, it's choosing the right ones.
Exactly.
Is of course the role of the person who's like brought in to do the digital or guide the digital transformation. It's not just everything. It's not the most complex thing. It's not necessarily the latest thing. It might be something as sort of like essentially kind of simple as SMS, if that's what you need to accomplish
Exactly.
your goal. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about the book is, uh, I'll just read. I don't. I'm going to ask you to sort of memorize or whatever, but I'll read your words back to you about the definition of digital transformation, and maybe ask you a little bit up to just expand on it and what it sort of means in practice. So you define digital transformation as the adoption of digital technologies to enhance the business by offering a better experience in the customer journey and operational efficiency gains coming from automation and improvement to the company's processes. So yeah, if you could just maybe expand a little bit on that about, for example, what you might mean by automation there.
Yeah, in terms of automation, actually I remember a lot of the gym pads of experience, because the automation, it's clear that you can gain a lot of that from that, because when you automate things, you can gain speed because things get done faster. You gain consistency because things get done at the same
Mm,
way.
mm,
Uh, Not necessarily right, but consistency. If it's wrong, it's always wrong in the same
in the
way
right way,
also.
yeah.
So, and this is very important because it's free. It frees up people to do other more complex tasks. So that's why I mentioned previously that the operations people were happy. They were thanking every new automation that we did at Gympass because they got free to work on more complex and more interesting things that they wanted to work, but they didn't had space to work because they needed to do that manual task. So that's what's behind this automation.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. There's a key word in your definition there is adoption. Digital transformation is the adoption of digital technologies.
Yeah.
And one thing you talk about in your book, but I'd just like to ask you directly, how important is it to have digitally savvy CFOs and CTOs and CEOs in companies that are undergoing digital transformation? I mean, there's the desire to do it, but there's
Yeah.
also the sort of, again, mindset of understanding like what digital transformation means.
It's super important, and I know that we don't have enough people with enough experience, especially with hands-on experience with um, creating and implementing a digital strategy. So that's why we need to find, and that's why I think the Lopez movement in going after someone with experience and bringing someone experience makes a lot of sense because you need someone that have has been there and has been able to build successfully digital products. So yeah, it's not so easy to find. Even in the book, I mentioned a survey done by MIT where they mentioned that only 7% of the companies has digitally savvy C levels. Obviously, this varies by position and this varies by industry, but the numbers are very shocking, to say the least, because even CTOs, they were able to find the CTOs of big companies. I believe they surveyed almost 2,000 big companies in 2020, and they realized that the CTOs, the chief technology officers, only 45 or 40 something percent are digitally savvy. I mean, you don't have a CTO that is digitally savvy is able to build digital products, that has experience building digital products. So that's concerning. So the way forward is to bring, and there is people that has this experience. The more tech companies there are, like Google, Facebook, and Netflix, and Amazon, there's a lot of people there with very good experience on how to build uh, good digital products. We use those products every day. We like those products. So we need to bring these people to these companies in order to do this, to help in this digital transformation journeys of these companies.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. You get a sort of like there's a kind of an interesting kind of demographic challenge, like how many
Yeah.
people are there out there who've actually had the experience to sort of do digital products and digital transformation and things like that. And of course, the amount is going to grow over time. But you reminded me of something that's come up on this podcast a number of times in the past, and that I've had some personal experience with, which is like older models of let's say business management, like old like what you would have learned in MBA school, 40 years ago. Technology was a box, right? It was a box underneath management, and you hired tech guys, and it was guys typically at the time, right? It was a very gendered kind of thing. It still is, unfortunately, but it was a box that you hired people who had expertise in that, but you didn't have to have any domain expertise, as it's sometimes called, in technology. And in fact, often, and this is me sort of being kind of opinionated here, often actually, if you wanted to be in management, or an executive, you had to demonstrate that you didn't know anything about technology, because if you did, you'd get put in that box and you'd never get up out of it. Uh, but what's happened with the sort of like, what's happened over time with things like, I mean, sort of some of the more famous examples are obviously Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I mean, very different kind of approaches to understanding the technology, but Bill Gates was in the form of actually knowing how to program computers. And Steve Jobs was in the version of like, it's not embarrassing to actually put your hands on the product and understand it from literally the hands-on level. Whereas in the past, if you knew how to program, you weren't going to be CEO. And if you actually like cared about touching products, you weren't going to be CEO. You show up with the hard hat at the factory, maybe, or something like that, and in a tie. But that's it. And so you're saying this is actually changing, though, that now there's just, coming from these companies like Google, there's more and more people entering the kind of senior levels of companies who do have some experience, even though there's not enough yet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. That's exactly the point. And the more we are able to bring these people to the traditional companies, the more we are able to bring this digital savviness, so to speak, into those traditional companies. Because it's an interesting concept that I only noticed after like 25 years in my career, 27 years in my career. Because in the beginning of my career, until like Conta Azul, before entering Gympass, I thought that technology was the center of the world, right? Everything was around technology, because the product was technology. Local Web was about technology. Conta Azul, the name of the company, was the name of the product, my own company also. When I entered Gympass, what we sold was not the technical product. What we sold was a corporate benefit, and the digital product was a way for us to make this product get to the to the clients. And if we think, for instance, Netflix, we don't subscribe to Netflix because of their digital product. We subscribe because of their movies and their series. We went to Amazon to buy things. We don't went to Amazon to buy their e-commerce software. So they are more traditional companies, but they were born with technology. So they were able to have the technology from the very, very beginning, from the inception of the company. And that's how they are so successful, and they are able to disrupt traditional companies. They are in the traditional business, but they were born. This is something that I said in the book. This is the third type of companies. We have the digital companies that sell technology. We have traditional companies that are the traditional banks and real estate and airlines and other things. And we have what I call the born digital traditional companies like Netflix, like Gympass, like Amazon. And the reason they are very, very successful is that they are able to put business and technology side by side. The two of them are able to take decisions about the vision, the strategy. It's not only the business that take decisions, and it's not only technology that take decisions. The two of them take decisions together. And when we go to the traditional companies, what happens is that they are used to have the business people taking all the decisions and say, hey, IT team, implement this, implement that, implement a website, implement an app. And that's not how the successful born digital traditional companies like Netflix, like Amazon, like Gympass work. They work having tech and business people sitting side by side, each of them bringing their own expertise, and they're exchanging and they're building the vision, the strategy, and executing the strategy together.
Yeah, no, that's very well put and very well said, and very hard earned experience as well. And something that's sort of becomes very clear in the book as well is the that you talk about ubiquitous language and stuff like that, and how that's so important to you. And one thing I just wanted to sort of say to anyone listening is that the choice of words that you're making is very careful when you talk about things like this. And there's a really good reason for that, which is you want to be able to sort of talk to people across business and technology and have the same terms
Yeah.
that they understand in a shared way. They might implement them differently, but to have these kind of shared terms is really really important. The last question I guess I'd like to ask you about the book um, is about the other part of it that I mentioned. So digital product management. Um, and so while digital transformation is the adoption, and now I'm going to quote you back at yourself again, digital product management, quote, is the function responsible for making the connection between the company strategy and customer problems and needs through digital technologies. This person must at the same time help the company achieve its strategic objectives, solve problems, and meet customer needs. And so I'm wondering if, as part of product management and bringing up this concept of ubiquitous language, is it how do you how do you bring the customers in to kind of a shared language, or do you to kind of a shared language as a product manager so that you can, like we've talked about business and the technology side of the company, but there's the sort of product side of the company and the customers themselves. Is that something that one would do in product management, is try and find what are the terms that the customers use, or what are the terms that we should get them to use, things like that?
Definitely, definitely. This is a very important part of the role of the product manager. Product manager is a very important function in product development, in digital product development. And as you mentioned, is the role that makes this connection between the objectives of the company, the problems and needs of the customer, and the technology. And in order to do that, this person needs to understand the customer, understand the problems that the customer has, understand the motivation that the motivation that the customer has to have the problem solved, understand the context where the client, the customer, has the problem. So it's a lot of research that needs to be done. This customer understanding is very, very important in order for a person to understand what needs to be built, what can be built in order to solve the problem. Normally, a good pair for the product manager in order to understand the customer is a person that we call product designer or user experience designer, and is a person that works together with the product manager in this what I call the problem discovery, understanding the problem, understanding what type of problem we try to solve, to whom, why we are trying to solve this problem. So this is a very important part of understanding, and actually is one of the four principles that I cite as the principles of the product culture. This is the focus on the problem, understanding the problem prior to jumping to solutions, because we tend, as humans, we tend to jump into solution mode as soon as we heard about the problem. We think about the solution, and then we want to implement the first solution that we think about. And ideally, what we need to do is understand more about the problem and then start to create solution hypotheses, not one and not two, but many solution hypotheses to see if maybe I'm able to find the cheapest and fastest to implement as possible. Like the example that I gave with the app with push notification for brokers and the SMS. They jumped into the first idea that they have. Let's build an app with push notification. If they had waited a little bit and thought more about what are the options or the solution options that we have here, they could maybe come up with the SMS, or here in Brazil, people use a lot WhatsApp or notification through WhatsApp or any other solution. So this understanding of the problem is very important and give us a space to create solution hypotheses and find the cheapest and fastest solution hypothesis to implement.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're reminding me of a kind of personal distinction I have between doing something in a rush and doing it quickly.
Yeah,
Going out the door without tying your shoes, you're out faster than if you tie them, but that's getting out in a rush because you're going to start tripping. Getting out
yeah,
quickly is tying your shoes faster.
that's right.
Not getting out without tying them. Uh, And so, yeah, but yeah, you mentioned the four principles at the end there. These four principles, I'll just, before we go on to the last part of the interview, just to give some people an impression of the sort of detail that the book goes into. The four principles for digital transformation that you set out are fast and frequent deliveries, focus on the problem, result delivery, this result thing being a key sort of concept that you have, and ecosystem mentality. And if you want to learn more about these, please go buy the book. It's really good, and it's very clearly written, I should say, and very informative. So just moving on to the last part of the interview, where we always like to talk to people briefly about their experience as a writer. So you've written a few books, um, and I'm sure that one of the reasons to write them is because you want to get your ideas out there and things like that. But also, if you are going to be or are already setting yourself up as a consultant, having books out there is a really great way for people to discover you and get confidence in you and what you know before they bring you on board. What's your approach to writing? Do you write every day? Do you write on the weekends? How do you go about doing, or is it
Yeah.
arbitrary?
It varies. Each book was different. This one, basically, what I did is I had already some articles that I had written for my blog. I have a blog where I post frequently. I try to write every week an article for my blog, and I already had some, and I look at them, and I saw they sort of make a seed for for a book. So I started to look at it and see the skeleton there, the spinal cord, if I should say, and then having this structure defined, then I started to fill in the blanks. So oh, I'm missing some information here, or I'm missing some more examples here. So then I started to write what I was missing. And what I did was I started to write, was not every day, but it was at least every week. I had this compromise to writing a little bit, at least a few pages, 5 to 10 pages every week. So I was
Okay.
able to see some progress.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I like how, you sort of just perhaps even unconsciously have a result oriented tactic there, right? Which is X number of pages. Because there's a lot of people who end like every to each their own. It's X number of hours that's most
Yeah.
important to them. And I mean, I'm definitely more of a kind of, the results kind of thing, right? The hours are kind of, unless you're like unless you're getting paid by the hour, the hours that you spend are not the result that you're looking for.
Yeah.
The last question I like to ask people on the podcast, if the guest is a Leanpub author, is if when you're using Leanpub, there was one feature you really just wish we had, or there was one terrible problem with it that you were just shaking your fist at the screen going, damn you, Leanpub, why do you suck? Why can't you fix this? So if there was one thing you could ask us to build or one thing you could ask us to fix, can you think of anything you would ask us to do?
No, no. Uh, I have some doubts about the Markua language because I've been using the Markua language, and some things that I think it's a bit difficult to run and create the book and see if it worked or not. It's like compiling the program sort of, and if there were a way to see the what we are building faster, it would be good. But other than that, I'm very satisfied with the way it works. It works quite well, and I even been looking in a way to create from the digital book to create the physical book to self-publish the physical book. So that will be my next step. I'm probably gonna try this with my last book.
Oh, that'd be really great. I would say two things. We do hear that from the first thing you said every once in a while. I mean, if you write a book on one thing to note for anyone listening, if you want to publish a book on Leanpub, you can just make the book any way you like and upload the EPUB and or the PDF to Leanpub, and then access all of our other awesome features and publish it and get 80% royalties and all that. But if you want to, the sort of like heart of Leanpub is writing in plain text in Leanpub, and then if you know it, imagine writing on a computer, you actually, or on a typewriter, and you wanted to give it to a machine to make a book out of it, you'd have to type the instructions out for like, this is a chapter heading and stuff like that. And there's a very much more efficient way and less explicit way of doing this. Markdown was the inspiration for it. That was for doing the same thing, but for websites, basically, or blog posts. Markua is the way of doing that for books. And it is kind of like, this will sound much more daunting than it should, but it is kind of like writing a little program that you give to a machine that then sort of knows what to do with it. And so, and that can, depending on what you're doing, like if you're writing paragraphs with chapter headings, you can learn everything you need to know in literally 10 seconds. But if you start doing more complex things like you do in your book, like tables and things like that, then it can start to get, especially if you don't have a programming background, it can start to break your brain a little bit, and things like that. And having an immediate rendering. So if you're writing in plain text, say in the browser, in your web browser, and writing on one side and having it show up magically on the right, exactly what it's going to look like in the PDF, for example, is something that we've had a lot of people ask for. When it comes to getting into print, yeah, I'm just going to mention, we provide the print ready PDF output that you need. So if you write your book in plain text in Leanpub, you can just click a button and get what you need to publish on Amazon or something like that. We also have our own publish on Amazon service that we offer now ourselves. It's relatively new, and it's there for people who just don't want to learn how to do Amazon and don't want to
Mhm.
manage all the weird Amazon payment processes and stuff like that. But in any case, Yoko, thank you very much for taking the time out of the day to talk to me and to talk to all of us. And thank you very much for using Leanpub as a platform for your really great books.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to for putting the link up there for us authors. Is a very good service, and I really enjoyed it. My 4 books are there, and I normally talk to people. If you want to make a book, go there in Linkpub. It works really well. It's a very fine platform for you.
Oh, thank you very much for that.